Is that?
Right there.
They're not doing.
Good afternoon, good afternoon.
We've been traveling for almost 36 hours, so. Um, Good afternoon, everyone. And what that does is to restrict the number of companies then who will want to have a presence in Barbados, or restrict the number of companies who will want to engage if we don't solve the correspondent banking problem. We were able then, and I spoke to Congresswoman Waters both at the summit as well as yesterday morning again after leaving Los Angeles, to agree and to have agreed that the congressional hearings will take place, we hope, in September, and we're just fine-tuning the dates so that we can bring greater awareness within the American financial sector to what is happening to the Caribbean. We also then thereafter had a visit from the House Democracy Partnership with Congresswoman Barbara Lee, who is the chair of the subcommittee in the Appropriations Committee of State and Foreign basically all non-military appropriations, and therefore absolutely critical to our interests and concerns going forward. And that, since she was here, she was engaging with the White House and President Biden on a number of things. And quite frankly, Congresswoman Waters and Congresswoman Lee and others have become our strong interlocutors and advocates on these matters of critical importance to Caribbean development. You have heard me say all too many times that Barbados and Bahamas cannot borrow from the World Bank to be able to finance our climate-related actions that we need to do. And therefore, we've been carrying this battle. We were able, in this meeting, with the President Joe Biden, and Vice President Kamala Harris, and I want to publicly thank them again for meeting with heads of government of the Caribbean. We had, I think, over 9 heads of government, 10 heads of government there, and foreign ministers for those who weren't there, predominantly. And we were able to agree not only on the launch of the Caribbean Partnership for Climate Action, to address climate action, which they will call CPAC. What is it? Let me get the acronym right. No, PAC 2030. And that will be the vehicle through which we will work to be able to move issues as it relates to climate. But we were very clear to the President and Vice President that that alone, as an initiative of theirs, could not satisfy, and that what we need now is immediate engagement on a number of issues. 1, food security. 2, energy security. And 3, finance generally, for the reasons that I just pointed out to you, where countries are excluded from being able to borrow because of national income, per capita income. So you have the absurdity that China, which is regarded as a low-income country, can borrow from the World Bank, but Barbados and Bahamas, which are upper middle-income countries, cannot borrow from the World Bank. Now, nothing can express our vulnerability closer, or more acutely, I should say, than what I expressed to them. As Minister of Education, I was busy dealing with qualitative reforms. How are we going to improve curriculum? How are we going to improve teacher training? How are we going to do all of those things? But ever cognizant that if a hurricane hit us, that within 24 hours we would move from qualitative reforms to a question of basic access to school places. Because if the schools get blown down, where are you going to send school children? Simple as that. And therefore, our vulnerability is such that we are always 24 hours away. Those people who went through Hurricane Elsa last year, those people, and we were lucky that Elsa moved over us in less than 2 hours. If Elsa did what Dorian did in the Bahamas and sat on us for 48 hours, Papa, yo, we would be having a completely different conversation now. But what is sad is that because of the climate crisis, because of the failure of countries across the world to take action, that is our ever-present reality. I always get nervous to make anything, commitments in August and September, because I know that any time all of them can be shut down. If something happening here, where you think I can be? Back here. You understand? So that is living on the edge. And think in your own personal life what kind of state you would be in if you're living on the edge all the time and you don't know when something will happen to you all the time. You know, you got a heart problem and you know you can get a heart attack because somebody raised your blood pressure and got your head confused. That's the kind of talk that I'm talking about, and that real talk that we had with President Biden. And in my view, President Biden was the glue that kept this thing together. He appreciated the concerns, and in spite of the fact that the United States is engaged clearly in a number of other global issues, and I want to make the point, as I said, we have 3 global crises hitting us at once. Any one is sufficient to take us out. Any one. 67% of the region we anticipate now, we expect, are experiencing moderate or severe food insecurity. What I mean, that they ain't sure where the next meal coming from, or that they have to literally manage it very carefully and tightly, so that when we talk in Barbados, it's not simply about Barbados alone. This is a global problem. That's why we went with the President of Ghana and we're working so hard on the Agro-Investment Forum. And in fact, food security was not on the agenda. It was when I was in Ghana at the Agro-Investment Forum in discussions with the White House, we kept saying, we want food security on. The Caribbean is who placed food security on the agenda. Secondly, with relation to energy security, reality is Trinidad has potentially excess capacity, but there are issues that we need to work out with a carve-out for other entities in order for that excess capacity to be brought. Why do we need energy security? My friends, the first 4 months of this year, we spent over $455 million in fuel. This is a country that is accustomed spending $230 million in the last 4 years, with the exception of last year. Last year was an aberration because of we shut down the country from the 31st of December. When we started opening it up in April, what happened? The volcano erupted, and they say that the gods conspire with us. So that the first 4 months of the year, basically Bajans were not moving. So last year was 167 or so. But every year before that, the 3 years before that, it was around 220, 230 million. We are spending almost double with respect to fuel in the first 4 months of this year, and the prices are still climbing. Now, as you know, in the budget, I capped the taxes that could come from fuel, and we've already shielded the country from just under $10 million of additional costs. And in a full financial year, it is going to hurt us, because it will probably cost us $50, $60 million to continue to shield Barbadians from the fuel costs, and we may have to find other things as we go along, depending on the growth, because you can't take blood from stone either. So we will continue to do all that we can on all fronts. The food security, the energy security, and then the finance. The White House has finally, and I want you to read the statement and think, because these statements are there, so it's not just my words you're going to rely on. And they've made it absolutely clear here in this sentence, building on Vice President Harris's meeting with the leaders, the United States launched the PAC 2030, as I told you, to facilitate renewable energy infrastructure development, including by increasing access to financing. They're going to increase the capital in the Inter-American Development Bank, particularly for the private sector. But as some of you may have heard me make the point in the green table, the table on green financing on Friday evening with Special Envoy John Kerry and the President of Colombia and the President of Ecuador, and chaired by the President of the Caribbean Development Bank, and I hope that you've shared it with Bajans. But we made the point that the elephant in the room is not the mitigation, what we can do to mitigate by building out the renewable energy, because the private sector and them going to come in because you can get a return on investment in those things. But nobody's going to come to help us adapt to this new world. And what do I mean by adapting? We got coastal communities How many people remember when 6 men had houses on that side, on the beach side? Now that you see stalls. Why? Because the sea come in and take away the land, and therefore the only thing that can really stand there are transient stalls. And there are other communities that are being affected. We have Glen Burnie, where we have literally land going into the ocean. And we have wells on the west coast that are dangerously close to having too much salt water, too much salinity, which means that you can't use those wells for the future. And we're already a water scarce country. So those types of projects that have no return on investment, who could do them? They're going to pay at the end of the mortgage, lengthen the mortgage for 2 more years, and give me 2 years elbow room. Nobody's going to give us the equivalent of 18% of GDP, which is about $1.8 billion. We've negotiated that in our new debt instruments after our debt restructuring. And we've been saying to the rest of the world, you need those types of instruments. You need to put pandemic clauses as well, as we've done in the Central Bank Act. And the government is going to have to look to be able to contextualize for the country. We are facing 3 crises. I've told you about the fuel crisis and what's happening with the money there. I've told you about the climate crisis, and we know what we're spending in terms of water and also housing and coastal defense. And I've told you, look at all of you with masks, so you know about the pandemic. You know about the pandemic. And you know what the pandemic has cost us in terms of a reduction of $600 million in revenue in 2020, while having to spend $400 million more that you didn't expect to. 2021 was not as bad, but it wasn't great where we are. We're now beginning to see the green signs of growth. I came in on a flight just now. 3/4 of the flight were tourists, not Bajans, tourists. But we have to do all in our power, each and every one of us. The last press conference I had in this room, I told you, every person in this airport has to be chief host. Every person in Barbados has to be chief host. You know why? Because everybody in the world fighting for the same thing that we're fighting for people to come to them. And either we're going to make them feel the most welcome, or they're going to do what? Go somewhere else. And that is what we are fighting for. The things that I'm doing, I really don't like a lot of attention. But the truth is that I know that if I don't push above and push up our hand above the rest, we can get lost along the way, even in terms of simple things. You heard me say Light and Power had difficulty, still having difficulty getting access to batteries. I met with Prime Minister Trudeau, and we've agreed to work together on a range of matters, separate from the fact that we co-chair the Sustainable Development Goals advocacy globally. But they understand that he too is suffering from the same problem, because there's a shortage of materials necessary to make the electric cars. There's a shortage of materials necessary to make the batteries. And that's what's killing the world, because you need the lithium. Okay? And in addition to that, we met with them also and said, look, it's the Caribbean that said, we feel that we can anchor our security in food. And you heard me say 6 and 12-week crops. People eat 6 and 12-week crops, they only got to wait on 6-month and 9-month crops. Let's do that. And we need to be able to deal with fertilizer, which is a function of energy. Fertilizer comes from what? Ammonia, natural gas, the gases. Okay? Not natural gas, but the gases. So these are the things that we are working on. In addition, yesterday, I left Los Angeles early yesterday morning and went to San Francisco to go to Oakland to meet with Congresswoman Barbara Lee again. As I told you, they are in charge in the U.S. government. You can't only deal with the executive, you got to deal with Congress. Straight talk. And therefore, we will have to continue to make our case. I spoke on the phone with Congresswoman Waters on a range of matters beyond the correspondent banking as well. And then we had other meetings to be able to look at creating opportunities for Barbadians, particularly in technology, etc. In the same way that in New York, we met with the hospital that we have been dealing with, and who put us a proposal. A number of our doctors have trained there, Northwell Hospital. They manage over 23 hospitals, I think, in New York. And we recognize that there are synergies, including efficiencies in procuring together so that we can have better costs on drugs, pharmaceuticals, I should say, going forward, and other supplies. Why? Because with cost of living increases, you've got to find every possible way to be able to reduce it. I think that the country has heard, or will hear Dr. Greenwich talking about the fact that you can't get around this level of inflation in the world just by jacking up prices and wages, because you're going to put yourself in a virtual cycle. And what is needed, and why I'm going to be talking to Bajans just as I talk with you during the pandemic, because this is a similar crisis, you've got to have behavior modification. You've got to change how you do things. If you was accustomed going to town in your one in a car all the time, see who else going to town from your district, and at least agree that you're all going to share. You might lose a half hour there or a half hour there, but you're saving money in your pocket to be able to help you do the other things you have to do. If you can grow and your grocery bill gone up by 20% or 10%, and you're spending an extra $20 or $40 or $50 when the week come, backyard, Roy will tell you, he got one of the nicest gardens I know as a backyard garden. I got a green thumb. I ain't got none. I ain't got no green thumb. But I still grow a little something every now and again. You understand? And all of us can. And that's why I've asked the Ministry of Agriculture to put the videos out there to be able to show people how to do these things. Okay, you've seen what we've been doing with Guyana and what we're working towards. We want to introduce aquaculture as well. And we want to make sure that we can remove all the obstacles to get affordable food here. But we need people to take their own individual action. If you're accustomed going out and buying Kentucky and Chifet all the time, not that I got anything wrong with them, but sometimes you got now to prepare a little lunch for yourself and carry it to work. I don't buy lunch every day. I just get lunch sent for me every day. Not only that, it's better for you. It's better for you, so that you're not eating things that you don't know about and you're holding back down the calories. So what I'm saying to Bajans, it ain't us one that's suffering from this cost of living problem. It is the whole world. And I therefore want us to be able, we know our parents knew how to cut and contrive. Our parents knew how to make do. Our parents knew how to make a whole pot full. You might not be able to bake a chicken no more. You got to put it in a stew. Because the gravy, no, real talk. Real talk. Very often when I don't want something heavy, I only eating gravy and rice. Or eating, you understand? Real talk. But you eat good still the same way with the vegetables with it. And if you got to stretch, we're going to stretch, because we are going to get through this moment. At the same time, we are working to see what we can do here so that Barbados can be a place where people who want to do blue and green technology for climate, accelerators for technology, and for biotechnology. And we are working literally to try and get these things going, because we're conscious that you can't educate people in sciences and then only believe that the only option for them is teaching. I support teaching and I want some of them to go into teaching, but it can't be the only one. So we're going to have to build up, and that's why you heard me talk about having for us to renew our whole industrial estates. When last industrial estates get built in Barbados? So if we want to attract people here, where we going to put them? You understand? So we've got to invest the money to do it. And these are the conversations that we're having, the partnerships that we need, and that's what this trip is about. Next week, on Tuesday, the Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund, Ms. Kristalina Georgieva, is coming to Barbados for 4 days. This is the first time a Managing Director of the IMF will be visiting any country in the Eastern and Southern Caribbean. In fact, I think the only country they've ever visited was when Madame Lagarde went to Jamaica a couple of years ago in the north. As you know, they had a program. Barbados is coming to the end of its program, and you'll hear more about it this week. But we live in an uncertain world, and we have to make the decision, and we're going to start that conversation with the social partnership from tomorrow, both on cost of living and on post-birth program, how we modify and go forward. But in this world where interest rates are rising, I can almost tell you already the cheapest money in town is where? Still there. During this week, she will also hopefully meet with regional ministers of finance and establish a clear framework and an understanding as to what the new Resilience and Sustainability Trust will look like. You heard me say that the World Bank has not been lending. The truth is the World Bank has not met small island developing states where we need to be met in terms of building out access to capital to adapt in a way that where the private sector is not going to spend money. And it is not exactly all that we need, but it is a long step. I won't preempt the details of those discussions because on Friday you'll have that. On Thursday we celebrate 20 years of CARTAC, and before that we also celebrate CARTAC is that entity that the IMF and others have established that gives us technical assistance to be able to help us with our management at a macroeconomic level and within the financial sector. And we will discuss, of course, start the discussion on Barbados' future relationship with the fund. And then, as I said, on Sunday, I would much rather not have to go again, but we have to go to the Commonwealth. We go first to Nairobi for 1 day, literally, to be able to commission the Barbados Embassy there, and then CARICOM and Barbados space. And then we go straight on to Kigali to the Commonwealth Business Council. I will be closing the Commonwealth Business Council with Prime Minister Johnson. And then we go into the full meetings where we not only look at the choice of a new Commonwealth Secretary General, but we also deal with the very vexatious issues of access to food security, etc. The grain is in Ukraine. I sit on the Global Crisis Response Group of the United Nations, and we know the grain is in the Ukraine, but we can't get it out. There are no ports by which to bring it out. President Macky Sall from Senegal met with President Putin week before last, and President Putin has said that there are other options for them. They want to look at getting the ports open for them to get through Turkey. The rest of us want to also get the ports open out of Ukraine. But in a stalemate, and who's suffering? The people of the world. And it didn't make no sense. But by the same token, we know that the world is at a very, very precarious place, because one or two missteps and what's going to happen? I leave it to you to think and dream, not for me to talk about. Okay? And then, of course, the CARICOM Heads of Government meeting again in Suriname in early July. So I want to get the country to be aware of what we're doing. It is not easy. My PS will tell you that I use a few choice words with her when she brings me the rates for Los Angeles, because these cities use it as a moment of price gouging. And as a result, Barbados did not stay in a hotel, nor Guyana didn't stay in a hotel. We went and rent some apartments and stay in the apartments. I stayed in an apartment with my officers because at this point, you've got to cut and contrive and do what you got to do still to carry along and let the money stretch. And I've said the same thing for them for when we go to the General Assembly. Not to mention, as I keep saying, too much out food ain't good for you. So if you can cook inside, which we did. I did breakfast for most of them. But it's a way of de-stressing. You see what I have to put up with? It's a way of de-stressing. And the only thing is, we're going through a rough time, and I just need everybody in the country to recognize that it is going to require a change of behavior, and that we are not in this world alone. At this stage, I'll pause and ask if there are any questions. Anything?
Okay,
You have a mic, Wendy, so that, and I'm conscious that we're on live, so that this mic here, I'm not sure the other mics are needed.
Okay. Prime Minister Wendy Burke, CBC News. In light of the Conference of the Americas, you spoke to the fact that President Biden was most helpful to us. But this is one country, yes, with a lot of clout, but still one country. What do you see the prospects, given the outcome of these meetings, as well as the
PAC 2030.
what do you see within, say, the next 6 months happening